I'm actually camping.
This is the campsite where Dior and his family were camping.
My 2-year-old son. We can't find him.
Dior is gone. She sees her little son playing in the dirt with some toys.
Last time I saw him was the back of his head, walking towards my grandpa.
Not a trace of my son found. Vanished.
He doesn't go anywhere without his blanket, his cup, or his monkey. All three of them were left at the campground.
Where did he go?
Nobody had the baby.
Lador, Idaho is a very remote area. There's no big buildings around. There's not a lot of services, no restaurants, no McDonald's, nothing like that.
When you pull into Lador, it doesn't take long for you to pull through. I mean, it's small.
Population? Just 105.
A lot of people visit Lador to camp, to fish, to spend time outdoors. It's a beautiful, rugged area.
It's often said, don't blink or you'll miss it. It's a small little town, a very close-knit little town.
And it's where 2-year-old Dior Coon's family decided they would go camping.
They decided on a whim, let's go camping for the weekend. Baby Dior was a typical toddler. Loved to play with his cars, loved to be with his family. There's pictures of him fishing with his parents and spending time with them. A typical, adorable little blonde-haired boy.
A boy his parents nicknamed Little Man.
Jessica Mitchell is Dior's mother. Vernal Coons is Dior's father. He had been with Jessica for several years, high school sweethearts. He was a truck driver. Robert Walton is Jessica's grandfather. He grew up in Idaho. He served in the military. He was not in perfect health when they went camping. In fact, he was on oxygen.
With Grandpa Bob's health deteriorating, this camping trip may be his last, which is why he has chosen the Timber Creek Campground, an approximately 30-minute drive from the small town of Lador.
Timber Creek Campground always held a special place in his heart, and that's why they decided to go that day. The Timber Creek Campground is very remote. You kind of have to know about it if you're going to go camping there.
Thursday, July 9th, 2015. 2-year-old Dior, along with his mom, dad, and Grandpa Bob, arrive at the Timber Creek Campground around 10 p.m. A campground so remote, the closest nearby campers are about a half a mile away. The people on this trip are alone.
According to the parents, it's pretty dark. It's late, it's pitch black, there's no street lights up there, and they go to sleep.
But the next day, everything changes.
What's the address of your emergency?
I'm actually camping in Lador, just outside of Lador.
Uh-huh.
My 2-year-old son, we can't find him.
Steve Penner is the sheriff of Lemhi County, Idaho.
At the time of the disappearance, I was chief deputy for Lemhi County. The call came in around 2:30.
How long has he been missing?
About
An hour?
Yeah.
Are you by water?
Yes.
I was actually handling another call in town, and dispatch called me and said, hey, we got a missing child in Timber Creek.
Do you know which campground you're in?
It's Stone Reservoir, Timber Creek.
We need search and rescue.
I was told that the child was left in the care of the grandfather. The parents went fishing. When they came back, they couldn't find him.
Dior's parents, Vernal and Jessica, say that they're going to go off and go down by the creek and check out the fish that are down there. And they said that they said to Grandpa, hey, can you watch little Dior while we go to the creek? And Grandpa said, sure, that's no problem. The parents go down to the creek. They spend some time at the creek.
Vernal returned to the campsite thinking baby Dior was with the great-grandfather. The great-grandfather thought the baby Dior was with Vernal.
They say to Grandpa, "Where's Dior?" Grandpa says, "We thought he was with you." "Well, no, we left him with you."
That's when they realized nobody had the baby. He was nowhere to be found.
The initial search was massive.
We want to cover every little nook and cranny.
We had helicopters, some divers in the reservoir, 2 dogs trying to unravel things, searchers on ATVs, motorcycles, and on foot.
You had crews on horseback. You had crews walking with sticks and tools, to look in the water. You actually had rescue crews in the creek, on hand and foot, crawling, combing every inch of that creek with their hands.
But those searches turned up nothing.
We're dealing with 4 million acres of rugged terrain. How do you search over 4 million acres and hit every spot?
2-year-old Dior Coons has seemingly vanished into thin air.
Once it took hold that there was a missing child in the forest, it didn't take very long for this to catch the airwaves, and it did pretty quickly.
With breaking news in the desperate search for an Idaho toddler who vanishes on a family camping trip, the parents are convinced that their toddler boy has been kidnapped.
2-year-old from Idaho Falls is missing tonight.
He was
He was
my
playing with
grandfather.
Grandpa. He was getting ready for a nap. By that time, it was almost 2, and he usually takes his nap. We decided we were going to go a little exploring. He was going to be good with Grandpa by the campfire. We weren't more than probably 50 yards away in 10 minutes. When I come back up to get him, and I yelled over to Grandpa, "Where's little Dior?" He immediately shocked. He says, he came up to you. Just in a split second, your whole world is upside down and vanished. There's not a trace.
Everybody across the country has picked up this story. And people all over the world are talking about this cute little blonde boy from Idaho who's missing at this campsite. Should he be out there and happen to see this, what would you say?
We're looking for you, son, and we will find you. And we love you more than anything in the world. You have a lot of people who love you and are looking for you. Buddy will find you. Daddy will find you.
Looking until we get you home. If somebody has him, please don't hurt him. Just bring him home safely to us.
No matter what it
where
takes.
he belongs.
It's a beautiful country. My name is Philip Klein. I am with Klein Investigations and Consulting in Nederland, Texas. Since 1992, we've done over 900 missing persons cases, probably more. In this case, I was the senior investigator regarding the Dior Coons disappearance. We got our airplane reservations, immediately flew up here with 4 members of the team to do the advance, find out, hey, what's going on, what's happening?
We started at a hotel with a video camera, interviewing everybody one by one, alone.
This camping trip was a trip that you wanted to take?
Yeah. I haven't been up there for 30 years. That's the reason I wanted to go there.
It's also a trip Vernal, also known as Dior Sr. or Big Dior, didn't want to take.
Vernal didn't want to go on this camping trip. He didn't want to go. He was very irritated about going.
I was told we were going camping, and when Bob's involved, it's always fishing too. I was really hoping Jessica would just say, we're not going. That happens once in a while. I kind of throughout the day gave her text messages hinting I don't want to go.
But there's one problem to the story that Grandpa Bob was asked to watch Dior. Grandpa Bob says he doesn't exactly remember that.
Dior Sr., Jess, walk away from the camp.
Right.
And do they ask you to watch Little Dior?
That's what I hear.
Okay, that's what you hear?
That's what I hear.
Jessica said, I want to go do some fishing. Jessica looked at Bob. You got him? Yeah, I've got him. I'll watch him. We started walking off.
I looked at the back of his head. I don't remember what I said to him. The last thing that I said to my son. And that kills me because it was my idea. Like, oh, yeah, I want to go fishing. Like, as a mom, I don't get that. I gotta do something for me time. So when my grandpa said he would watch him, I was all for it. I was excited.
Where was little Dior as they're walking off? And from your vision point, where is little Dior?
He was off to my left about 80, 90 feet, sitting right there.
And he's gone.
He's gone.
How does someone poof into thin air? The story just didn't make sense. The whole thing doesn't jive. It just doesn't.
You think your grandson could have been kidnapped?
Possibility. I'm wondering if somebody was watching us and come down and got the kid.
It turns out the Coons family and Grandpa Bob weren't the only people on that camping trip. Grandpa Bob had brought a friend.
So he was just with you and the grandfather when he wandered away?
Mm-hmm.
And then you guys thought he was with the parents?
Yeah. I don't want to answer any more questions or anything.
So it's July 9th, 2015. A little boy named Dior Coons goes camping with his mom and dad. Dad's name is Vernal, mom's name is Jessica. Accompanying them on this camping trip is Jessica's grandfather, Robert Walton.
This is the Timber Creek Campground, and this was the spot where the family came up and started camping. It's kind of the spot where it all began.
The parents go down to the creek, they spend some time at the creek, they come back to the camping site, and Dior is gone. His parents say they don't know what happened. Other people on the camping trip say they don't know what happened. Now the search is on for this little boy. Do you believe it was an abduction?
You know, personally, I think an abduction is one of the least likely events. Primarily, the information we have is Grandpa's watching the child. He tells me he looks away momentarily. When he looks back, he's gone. And I can't completely rule it out, but it's one of the least likely things that occurred.
But if it wasn't an abduction, what could have happened to Dior Coons?
There are a few different scenarios that could have happened on this camping site.
One theory, an animal attack.
The animals and the wildlife in this part of the country, it's not just chipmunks, it's not just groundhogs. There are cougars, there are wolves, there are grizzly bears, there are very large, very aggressive animals.
There's bears, lions, wolves. They're major predators. Little Dior, he's a fawn. He's the size of what they're consuming that time of year.
But there's no evidence Dior was taken by an animal.
Wildlife's going to leave a trail. You're going to hear something, you're going to find blood evidence, you're going to find clothing evidence, you're going to find a body part, you're going to find bones. They're not going to eat the bones.
In fact, there's no evidence of little Dior at all.
You've got so many resources up there and not one shred of evidence.
It turns out Dior's parents and the little boy's great-grandfather weren't the only people on this trip. There was also a man named Isaac Renwand, a friend of Grandpa Bob's, who little Dior's family had never met before taking this trip.
One of the things we wanted to accomplish on this trip to Idaho was we really wanted to actually speak with Isaac. Our photographer and I drove up to the house. We approached the front door, and as we knocked on the door, there was about a 30-40 second pause, and there was nobody clearly coming to the door. We were about to knock again or kind of turn away and just assume nobody was home. Isaac popped his head up out of the window. I didn't anticipate that. We asked him if he would like to have a conversation on camera. He said to us that he really wasn't interested at the time.
But he did talk to the East Idaho News.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I just want to see if you have anything to say about Dior missing. I don't.
No. Can you tell us what happened up there?
I don't know. He disappeared.
So he was just with you and the grandfather when he wandered away?
Mm-hmm.
And then you guys thought he was with the parents?
Yeah.
And the parents came back and he was gone?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I don't want to answer any more questions or anything.
Here's a stranger who's with this family on a camping trip. These parents that had never really dealt with him, they don't really know who he is.
I didn't know the guy up until the day before my son went missing. It's the first night I met the guy.
My grandpa said, my friend Isaac's going to go.
Bob said, his exact words are, we got to go over and pick up a friend of mine. And I said, well, who is it? And he says, buddy of mine. And his exact words, and I quote, were, he's a good guy, he's a little weird, but he's an all right guy.
Why did you invite Isaac up to this particular camping trip?
Oh, I don't really know why. He just goes along sometimes, that's the way.
They arrived up at the campgrounds late in the evening. They set camp up, lit a fire.
Tell me Isaac's demeanor that night when you were sitting around the campfire.
I just remember him playing with like this machete knife thing. He kept grabbing it, and there was this log that was cut, and he kept just like throwing it down so it would get stuck in the wood, and then pulling it out, and then throwing it back down, and then pulling it out.
They talked in the statements about Isaac being irritated with the baby. Why would you bring a baby camping?
Isaac, he was giving a shit that night about having him there.
He was giving you shit about having who there?
My son.
He was giving you shit about having Dior there?
Yeah, he made like a disgusted noise. He didn't want to hear my son cry. He made the comment of, I don't know why you want to bring a child up here. I remember looking at him and kind of giving him a look like I've had enough, shut your mouth.
I noticed his tone in his voice being kind of like he didn't want to be around kids.
And eventually everyone went to bed.
Jessica and Vernal and the baby slept in the back of the Suburban that was Bob's. There was a mattress back there.
They woke up the next morning and there was a knock on their window.
I heard wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey, and it was Isaac waking us up. I was a little irritated, honestly. I was like, who is this guy just randomly like waking me up? I made breakfast, we all sat down and ate.
At about 10 o'clock in the morning, Jessica told Vernal that she needed to go get feminine products because she had started her period.
When I realized I was on my period, I went back to the campfire and I told Dior, you need to go to the store. I just started my period and I don't have anything and we have to go back to the store today, like now.
This is when the timeline gets really hazy.
And it's at this store that little Dior's mom says she notices someone.
Somebody was saying that they seen this guy in Lador looking at the kid.
I would look over and he would be staring at little man. No expression on his face.
And attention is starting to focus on those at the campsite.
In any case like this, I mean, you're going to have to look at the 4 people that were there.
Do you trust Isaac?
But for what?
Would you trust him to watch your grandson?
No.
Do you trust him to not steal your money?
No.
Why are you friends with him? If you don't trust him, why would you?
Well, you know what? That's a hell of a question.
They're trying to mislead us into this being this perfect little partridge family when they're anything but that.
So we all probably got a different story. You better shut up before I get in trouble here.
What's the address of your emergency?
I'm actually camping in Ledor, just outside of Ledor.
Uh-huh.
My 2-year-old son, we can't find him.
2-year-old Dior Coons has just disappeared while camping with his family.
How long has he been missing?
About an hour.
An hour?
Yeah.
Do you know which campground you're in?
It's Stone Reservoir, Timber Creek.
There were 4 individuals up on the top of the mountain, along with the baby Dior.
On this camping trip were Dior's parents, Vernal Coons and Jessica Mitchell, along with Dior's great-grandfather, Bob Walton. Grandpa Bob had also brought a friend, Isaac Renwand.
What do you remember what happened up there?
I don't want to comment on that.
Do you remember the last time you saw little Dior?
No comment.
Okay, but he was up there.
Yes, that he was.
The campsite starts here, in which they made a semicircle around. They had the camper attached onto the truck, and they had Isaac's little camp spot right in this area right here. We had a tent set up, and then they had the Suburban set over here. So it was kind of like a semicircle with the picnic bench being used, and this was the fire pit.
For little Dior's family, the day began normally, until around 10 a.m., when Dior's mom says she noticed she had started her period.
She went back to the camp and she told Vernal, I have to go to town. I started my period. I need tampons.
But the only store in the area, more than a 30-minute drive from the Timber Creek Campground, the Stage Stop in Leadore, Idaho. Jessica and Vernal say they loaded little Dior into the family's truck and began the journey back into town. But at the Stage Stop, Jessica says she notices something.
That's when Jessica goes into, oh, there was a guy sitting at the booth right there to the right staring at us. He gave me the creeps.
Jessica said that there was a creepy-looking man looking at Dior.
I noticed there was an older guy in the corner booth table in the front of the store. He was just sitting there drinking coffee, but I would look over and he would be staring at little man. No expression on his face. Every time I would look at him, he would look down and put his coffee cup up to his lips.
They said after they got their candy and their food from the Stage Stop that they headed back up the mountain.
Now, depending upon whose story you listen to, they're going to go this way to what they call the big tree. They start walking. They say, Bob, can you watch little Dior? According to who you talk to, Vernal or Jessica, Bob says, yeah, don't worry about it. Leave him here.
I asked my grandpa if he could watch little man while me and Dior walked up to go check out the creek to see if I could catch anything. My grandpa said, yeah, that's fine.
They start walking this way, and little Dior, depending upon whose testimony you listen to, runs after them.
We started walking off. Little Dior noticed, and we made it 15, 20 feet. Jessica turned around, I turned around, and there he was, walking after us. And I looked at him, I said, are you coming with, or are you going to stay here with Grandpa Bob?
He said, no, yeah, and turned around and walked back towards my grandpa.
And they said the grandpa held up a Snicker bar and said he had candy.
Bob says, I got candy and a little miniature mini Snickers bar.
My understanding is you offered him some candy, is that right?
Could have done.
They said Isaac took him to the creek and he said, I caught fish there, I caught fish there, I caught fish there.
Eventually, little Dior's dad goes back to the campground, only to discover his son is missing. Dior's mom claims she heard Vernal yelling from the creek.
I heard Dior yell, and I couldn't understand what he said. And I asked him what, and he said, little man's gone, he's missing, we can't find him.
I'm from Texas, and let me tell you really kind of straight. There's no way you can hear anything down there with those two brooks going like they are. No way. No how.
Do you remember Jessica asking you to watch?
No, I don't. That's what I heard her say that. But I don't remember that, but I was watching him anyway, you know.
Why do you take a man who's got COPD on oxygen to a high level elevation where the oxygen air is thin anyway? The whole trip was odd to me. But
So I don't know what happened. That's That's all there is to it. But he was gone.
I will never forgive Bob for letting my son get out of sight. I will never forgive him.
How do you feel about your grandpa? I feel like he's putting a lot of this on himself, and it's hurting his health pretty bad. I think he feels guilty about it.
Do you feel any guilt at all? Do you feel any anger or upset over what happened?
No. I'm upset about it.
But you don't feel any guilt over it?
No.
He loved little man to death. He always talked about how good of a kid he was.
What was your relationship with baby Dior? Were you close to him?
Not really.
Were you like affectionate with the baby? Or?
No, I don't pick kids up and stuff like that. Okay. Give them the kisses like the women? No, sir.
Do I think Jessica did anything? No, because she was there with me.
If it's my grandpa, that's guilty. I don't care. Like, I just want my son back. He's 2. I would give up my life just to bring him back, to know that he is safe.
You're the mother of Dior. You deserve to know that when Philip sat here and got in his face and asked him some pretty tough questions, he peed on the chair. But yet he doesn't know anything.
Do you want to know why he peed? Because he knows I know. He knows I know.
Where's your restroom? I gotta take a leak.
Okay, very good. Let's take a break. Caroline, why don't you show him real quick?
He got up. We were going to take a break, and his chair was wet.
Grandpa had no reason to kill that child. Jessica had no reason to kill that child.
Did you have anything to do with the disappearance of your son?
Vernal had no reason to kill that child.
Did you have anything to do with this?
Hell no. That little boy is everything to me.
But the private investigator hired by Dior's family and the police are about to come to a stunning conclusion.
We just beg everybody to please keep your eyes open.
I hope that he's okay, and in my mind, that's what keeps me going, that he's okay.
This is Ladore, Idaho. It is a very, very rural and small town. They are a camping area. There are people that come in, and camping's real big in Idaho. And that's important to this community because that's where people make their money, off of camping supplies, diesel, kerosene, things that you use up in the mountains up here.
It's where 2-year-old Dior Coon's family decided to go camping. But the very next day, Dior is gone.
Dior disappears. Everyone's hoping that there'll be some sort of break within 2 or 3 weeks, but nothing happens. Nobody's arrested, the little boy isn't found, and weeks go by.
We had some pretty serious concerns from the get-go on the case that, you had 4 people on top of a mountain. You had a mother, you had a father, you had a grandfather, and then you had what we call the anomaly, which is Isaac. I think the answer is up there somewhere. The answer is definitely up there somewhere.
But that answer has so far managed to elude authorities.
Do you think that Dior could have had anything to do with it?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, he was with me the whole time.
Do you think there's a chance that Jessica could be involved in this?
I don't think so. I have toyed with that in my head.
Do you trust Jessica 100%?
When it comes to my son, I did. When it comes to, any life decision, no.
Do you think Jessica hurt him?
I don't think Jessica hurt him.
Do you think his daddy hurt him?
I don't think so.
One of the few leads in the case, a mysterious man at the only store in town.
They had actually gone down to the little store in town that morning, and Jessica said that there was a creepy-looking man looking at Dior.
all the investigators, including Lehigh County, we all go find this guy. He's like, I don't know what y'all are talking about. Yeah, I go in there every day for coffee. I sit there for a little bit and then I go home.
We actually had him do a sketch artist, and one of the deputies was pretty sure, I think I know this guy, but eventually we figured out who he was, and that was kind of the end of that.
You cannot see,
including that tree that's down.
Although the private investigator on the case, Philip Klein, believes he has at least some idea of what happened.
Number one, there was not an animal that took the child. Number two, there was no forced abduction. So that leaves us with one last possible theory, that the child could have died up on the mountain either accidentally or possibly with intent. We do not believe Dior Coons is alive.
This is a small town. We're dealing with a missing child who may have been killed, who something nefarious may have happened. Things like this don't happen here.
Shortly after Klein releases his findings, the sheriff at the time, Lynn Bowerman, makes a stunning move, naming Dior Coons' parents suspects.
The parents of missing toddler Dior Coons Jr. are now suspects in his disappearance. The Lehigh County Sheriff says they are at the top of his list.
Basically, I was saying they were the top persons of interest, but, actually, yeah, I believe they're suspects.
It's a move not everyone working on the case agrees on.
I think suspect was a little strong. Consider them uncleared people of interest.
I felt it was necessary to come forward and say that the parents are being less than truthful. Things that should be important to them, important in their memory, have changed from who made the decision to do what, or who cooked that morning, or who took a fishing pole down to the creek. Just minor changes like that, constantly changing.
The focus of the investigation is steering toward the parents.
I believe so.
What do you think happened?
I have no clue. Absolutely no clue.
But by summer 2016, nearly 1 year after Dior Coons disappeared, Sheriff Bowerman seems to have an idea. And his suspicions are starting to sound a lot like Philip Klein's.
I'm moving more and more towards it being a homicide, strictly because we've ruled out the abduction, we've ruled out wild animals. The fact that we have no credible witness at this time that can clearly state he was at the scene, not only am I not believing he was ever there, but I'm believing we have a homicide.
The questions arose, was baby Dior even at the campsite?
It's been 8 months since rescue crews first began searching for missing toddler Dior Coons Jr. Tonight, for the first time since his parents were named suspects, Jessica Mitchell and Vernal Coons are answering the questions you want to know.
Did you murder your son?
Absolutely not.
No. Was there an accident?
No. If there was, it wasn't of my knowledge.
Exactly.
Do
We
you
have
have
no knowledge of that. There was.
You're saying you have nothing to do with his disappearance?
No.
No.
He was left with a trusted adult. When I come back, my son was gone.
They had an interview with one of the local stations. There's the aired version and then there's the uncut version.
Private investigators have obtained that uncut version.
As long as you promise me that no uncut, unedited crap ends up out there.
And they've released portions of it to the public.
He just had this personality, like he just lit up an entire room. His laugh, his just the way that he did
Hold on
everything.
Say had.
SD card. Can I have your 6 videos?
Has, don't say had.
Yeah, let's pause.
You can't do that.
He's coaching her. I don't know why he would be coaching her. And typically speaking, when you refer to a child in past tense, that parent, it's a subconscious thing. They know in their mind the child's not coming back.
Since he disappeared, there has been no trace of the missing toddler. And everyone from police to local citizens have theorized about what may have happened. But one theory stands out.
There's also the theory that he was never even up there in the first place.
Aside from the 4 people that were here, do you have any witnesses that saw Dior around that time?
There's a couple people in town that they're not 100% sure, but they think they saw him when they made their trip to town.
The only witnesses who can definitely say Dior was on the trip are his parents, his great-grandfather, and Isaac.
Sheriff Penner has said that he believes the child was up there at the campsite, and he has no reason to believe otherwise.
I'm fairly confident that Dior was there. I can't find anybody that says they're 100% positive he was there, but I feel fairly confident he was there at one time.
Making matters more complicated, there's no surveillance video at all.
I'd be surprised if there's a camera anywhere in Leadore. It's a real small community.
As police search for answers, something shocking is about to happen with Grandpa Bob.
It's been over 4 years now since Dior disappeared. There have been no arrests. The body has not been found. There are still so many questions that remain about this case.
Of the 4 people here, no one is clear.
That's fair to say, I think.
It was so taxing on Jessica and Vernal that they split up, and Jessica has remarried. Vernal has dated a few people here and there. He continues to drive trucks out of Idaho. Isaac continues to live at his same house, continues to fish, continues to ride his bike.
You don't want to carry this situation to your grave. Look at me. You know you don't want this to go to your grave.
Right.
Don't you?
Do I know it?
Mm-hmm.
Sure I do. I want to get it solved. I don't want to be messing with it.
Nearly 4 years after Dior disappeared, Grandpa Bob passes away.
A lot of people wondered if he took his knowledge to the grave with him. We may never know.
I don't think Bob killed the child. I don't think Bob had anything to do with killing the child, but I do think Bob had more information than he revealed.
There were only 3 people currently alive that were there at the campground when the child went missing. Isaac Renwant, Jessica, and Vernal. The only way that they can clear them is by finding the child.
Although both the private eye and the sheriff at the time believes Isaac has been the most truthful person there that day.
In our opinion, Isaac, the 3rd person up here, is the only person that has kept his story straight, the only person that tells the same story, and the only person that'll sit there and look you in the eyes and go, I don't know. And I believe he doesn't know.
He's probably been more consistent on his story from the very beginning, you know. I mean, we haven't seen any of the big discrepancies with him.
Philip Klein has withdrawn from the case.
I honestly don't think that we will ever know what really happened to him. I really don't.
We love to sit around and talk about how rough and tough we are as investigators. This is a case that haunts me. My team's been ridiculed. My team has been beat down. We did a damn good job on this case. I don't know what direction this case can go now without a body. I hope that whoever comes into this case from this point further can solve this case for the town of Leadore, for extended family members of the Kuntz family and Jessica's family.
It's such a beautiful place, and now it's such a haunted place to me. July 10th, it'll just be a day that's just haunting the rest of our life.
Dior Kuntz is still missing. If you have any information, please call 1-800-843-5678 or 208-756-8980.
We really have no idea how she got there.
Is this one of the greatest unsolved mysteries?
It must have been an absolutely horrifying discovery.
Surveillance video from the hotel's elevators show her acting unusual, as if she's hiding from someone.
It is truly bizarre.
Just a few miles from the glitz of Hollywood, California, and the beach along the Santa Monica Pier sits downtown LA. Known as the entertainment capital of the world, every year, millions of tourists flock to see Los Angeles. In January 2013, Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old Canadian student, took a trip to LA. But high above this sprawling metropolis would be a dark secret.
Her name's Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old college student from Vancouver, Canada. She was going on vacation. In her picture, she's smiling, she's wearing glasses, she's very casually dressed.
And Elisa grew into a young woman who was said to be one of the nicest people you'd ever meet, who would do anything for anybody.
She was going to come down to California, taking public transportation, traveling by herself.
Then on this trip, she happened to go down to San Diego, and then she was coming through LA. She had her whole life ahead of her. So that makes what happened to her all the more shocking and bizarre. Elisa Lam comes to Los Angeles on January 26, 2013. And 2 days later, on January 28, 2013, she checks into the Cecil Hotel. They had this super slick website that made it look like you were staying in this adorable little boutique hotel with really affordable rates in the heart of up-and-coming downtown Los Angeles.
But 3 days after checking into the hotel, Elisa Lam mysteriously vanishes.
Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. Yesterday, we were made aware of robbery homicide of missing persons case, Elisa Lam. She was last seen on the 31st at the Cecil Hotel at 640 South Main Street.
She would be in daily communication with her parents and her family back up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and the contact stopped, which raised suspicion for the family.
Right now we're asking your help. We have a photo. Parents are here. They've flown down from Vancouver, and we're seeking to get this photo out so we can find Elisa.
You see Alyssa's parents in the background just looking so heartbroken and bewildered and confused. And they don't say anything, but you can see on their faces how terrified they are for their daughter.
I remember this press conference because I was like, okay, there's, someone who, is of my race who's missing. There's agony. They want their daughter to be found. They want their sister to be found.
They contacted the hotel and verified that nobody had seen Elisa, and so a report was made with the Los Angeles Police Department.
There's been no communication at all, and that's worried us and worried the family, so we're proceeding with the investigation on that.
Has she ever gone missing before? I mean, you mentioned it was out of
No, there's no prior history of any kind of behavior like this or any problems like this.
So, of course, the place to start is back where she was last seen, which is at the Cecil Hotel.
Police discover Elisa was last seen the day she was scheduled to check out of the hotel.
Investigators spent countless hours evaluating all of the different video cameras inside, outside the adjoining hotel, and some of them were working, some of them weren't. They drew the conclusion relatively soon that they did not think that she had left the hotel. They think she's there. Now it's just a matter of finding her.
There was an intense search for Elisa Lamb. Flyers were passed out.
They did look through the hotel. They went floor by floor. They did talk to people. They did do a full search. There was no sign of Elisa Lamb.
The investigators would have gotten the hotel, the list of all the guests, and looked at the backgrounds of every single one of those. And the first people they would have looked at were sexual predators, people on parole, probation, violent offenders. Hotel workers were questioned, all of the staff, maintenance workers.
19 days after Elisa was last seen, there's disturbing news.
I get in that morning, and we're assigned to turn a story that day about this extraordinarily strange event happening at the Cecil Hotel. The first people I saw was this British couple. They had been at the hotel 8 days, and they then told a revolting story. I don't know how else to put it.
There was something wrong. The pressure in the water was terrible. The shower was awful. The water, and when you turned the tap on, the water was coming black first for 2 seconds, and then it was going back to normal.
They noticed the water pressure was erratic. The water had a very peculiar odor. They drank from the tap. They bathed in it. The complaints were coming in about the water. So the maintenance man went to the hotel's water supply, the 4 tanks that are on the roof, and he proceeds to check them.
He noticed that there was a hatch open on top of one of the tanks.
And now to a gruesome discovery in California. The body of a Canadian tourist missing for 2 weeks now. It has been found. Investigators are trying to determine how the body of a missing woman from Vancouver ended up inside a water tank on top of a Los Angeles hotel.
It ends up that Elisa Lamb's body had been decomposing in the hotel's water supply.
So when the maintenance worker discovered her, she was naked, floating face up in the water, and that's what caused him to contact the police. The tank was full, and the body was at the top, and her discarded clothes were at the bottom of the tank. The process to remove her body, they decided the best way to do it was to drain the tank, so that her body would slowly come to rest at the bottom of the tank, and then cut with a torch a hole in the side from which they could remove the body. That's the best way to treat the body in order to retain any potential evidence and maintain the condition of her body.
The state of her body is particularly memorable because she was in the water for some time before she was discovered.
Obviously saturated with water, the skin's very wrinkled.
And she wasn't wearing any clothes.
There may not have been an immediate recognition of her because, the skin around her eyes would be kind of bulging and her skin would have been just very bloated and discolored.
Through markings on the body, investigators were able to determine it was Elisa Lamb.
Along with her clothing, her wristwatch, and her room key were also discovered in the tank. The fact that a body has been found in a water tank on top of a hotel, that's automatically suspicious. That's just not where you expect to find a body. So when they found her body, of course they're going to treat it as if it's potentially a homicide in order to preserve evidence.
You could see the water towers from the ground. If you step back a couple of blocks, you could visibly see them.
There's 4 of them that work in conjunction with one another to fill and refill and regulate the water usage in the hotel.
They were 10 feet high, and they were very close together. So it would have been very hard for somebody to get into the water tanks.
The tanks are made out of, thick gauge steel. And of course the hatch is made out of the same material as the tank. It's heavy-duty steel.
It was really difficult to tell just from the video, but the opening was approximately this big.
The hatches were unlocked, unsecured. The hatch on it is an access portal, so to speak. It has hinges, but those hinges aren't intact, and you can literally just slide that hatch off to the side.
5 days before her body was found, police released the biggest bombshell in the case. Haunting video of Elisa's last moments alive.
It was surveillance video from the top of the elevator. You could definitely see that it was her.
You're not exactly sure what's going on. She's pushing buttons, she's cowering in corners.
At one point in the elevator, it looked like maybe she was hiding from someone. She seemed to be hiding in a corner, trying to make herself small and be out of sight if someone were walking by the elevator, and that was one of the moments that was rather odd.
Seems like she's talking to someone with these kind of wildly gesticulating hand movements.
I think that the elevator video is the best video that was retained so that somebody could recognize her. The clothing that was discovered in the tank with her matched the clothing that she was wearing in the videotape in the elevator.
With the release of the video, speculation was mounting about who could have been responsible for Elisa's death. And one of the biggest questions was, how did Elisa get up to the water tank?
It wasn't easy to get up to the roof of the hotel.
There was 2 access points, two ways to get up to the roof. There's a fire escape, and then there's also the internal stairwell that leads up to a door. That door is supposed to be alarmed so that if somebody opens that door from the inside, it notifies people down at the front desk, and that would cause them to send up a security guard or some hotel personnel to investigate why that door's been opened.
The hotel said the roof was a restricted area to guests.
The LAPD, the investigators, are not exactly sure how she accessed the roof.
The hotel staff says the roof's alarm system was working and was never activated during Elisa's stay.
One of the really suspicious things about Elisa's death is when the LAPD was investigating, trying to find her, they had canine units come to the Cecil, sniffing out for Elisa's scent.
Canines searched the hotel days after Elisa Lam was reported missing.
They did go to the roof with the canine unit, but the dogs detected no scent on the roof.
How did the dogs miss this? If she was walking on the roof, if she climbed her way to the water tower, how did the dogs miss that?
And the LAPD, weirdly enough, did not check the water tanks. So Elisa could have been in that tank the entire time. Or there's the other really strange fact, and that fact is that since the canine unit didn't detect Elisa's scent on the roof, perhaps her body had been placed in the tank after her death.
Once you get up to the roof, you've got to remember that everything attached to Elisa Lam, her body and her clothes, they're submerged in water, and that restricts the scent. And most people don't know that there was an alert. The dog did go down a hallway and alert at a window, and that window leads directly out to the fire escape. But that's where it lost its scent.
Police were now treating Elisa's death as suspicious.
Do you have her cell phone? Was she left at the hotel?
Could Elisa's cell phone explain what happened to her? And when the autopsy report is released,
I think somebody else had to have been involved for her to get in that position.
It would reveal some unsettling secrets and add to the confusion. Elisa Lam checks into downtown LA's Cecil Hotel. Chilling video from the hotel's elevator appears to show her hiding from someone. Then, she mysteriously disappears.
19 days after Elisa was missing, the hotel starts getting complaints about the water quality in the hotel rooms. So the maintenance man for the Cecil goes up to the roof, checks the water tanks, and there he sees Elisa's nude body floating in the water tank.
There was something about this death that's very gruesome. It's disturbing.
For as long as 19 days before Elisa's body was found, hotel guests brushed their teeth, bathed, and drank from the building's water supply.
Makes you feel physically sick, literally physically sick, but more than that, you feel psychologically it's not, you think about it and it's not good.
It really turns my stomach. Guess why a lot of people have left and went to another hotel.
Police were calling Elisa's death suspicious. Initially based on how Elisa was acting in the hotel elevator, some had speculated that maybe she had been under the influence of drugs.
I'm Jason Tovar, and I performed the autopsy on Elisa Lam. I didn't find any illicit drugs.
Her toxicology report also didn't show any signs of alcohol intoxication. Elisa's autopsy was completed 4 months after her body was found, but it would only add to the confusion.
After my examination, I concluded that the cause of death was drowning and the manner of death was accident. There was no evidence of foul play or an intent to harm herself, so homicide and suicide were excluded.
But not everyone was satisfied with the autopsy findings. Some believed that this had to be more than just an accident.
My name is Katie Orphan. I was one of the last people to see Elisa Lam. One of the things that is certainly strongest for me is the sense that maybe the way her death was ruled is not accurate. That maybe she didn't accidentally drown. It would have been a lot of work for her to get up in that water tank.
Katie Orphan is manager of a bookstore 2 blocks from the Cecil Hotel, chillingly called the last bookstore. Elisa Lam visited the store on January 31st, 2013.
She kind of stood out as a customer. She was asking my coworkers and myself a bunch of questions, telling us about herself a little, and really engaging in a way that a lot of our customers don't necessarily. They just come in to shop, but she was really chatty.
The police contacted Katie Orphan after finding a receipt and some items from the bookstore in Elisa Lam's hotel room. Elisa Lam came into the store in the afternoon, and based on the police timeline, Elisa was seen in the hotel elevator video hours later.
I spoke with the manager.
She was buying gifts for her family.
Yeah, she mentioned her
And she had a lovely conversation with her. There was nothing unusual that she noticed.
She was smiling, she was cheerful. Yeah, she was in a good mood.
And I find that very inconsistent with all of the evidence that we see.
She asked us for recommendations, for directions on how to get to Pasadena. She bought a number of books, a number of records. She asked us about luggage limits and shipping to figure out how much she could buy and get home.
So she was planning ahead to doing things, which doesn't exactly match the profile of someone who's going to jump into a water tower.
She didn't sound like somebody who was wanting to die or didn't expect to be going somewhere. So I'm not seeing any indicators that she was in a depressive state at all.
I think somebody else had to have been involved for her to get in that position, for her to be found up there. The conclusion to her case is not satisfying to me, and I think to a lot of other people. It seemed
like a very simple way of closing the case and saying, hey, there's nothing more we can do.
It takes an extreme amount of determination to say that she went out there to commit suicide.
I think most people, when you visit a hotel, especially in an older hotel, how do you know that there are water tanks on top of a building? How does she know that?
Why not just walk to the edge of the building and do a swan dive? I mean, it's just too bizarre to think that this just happened. I have difficulty believing that.
So was Elisa's body placed in the tank after her death? Police canines didn't detect her scent on the roof, and shocking details about the hotel were starting to emerge.
The Cecil's history is filled with really horrible stuff.
Who else was in the hotel?
Water from the tap, something the Cecil Hotel doesn't want you to see. Hotel resident Alvin Taylor helped us videotape it with a cell phone.
Yeah, smells chlorine.
Chlorine. What the city is using to flush the hotel's entire water system after the gruesome discovery of a woman's body inside one of the rooftop tanks that may have been there for as long as 2.5 weeks.
Elisa Lam mysteriously vanishes from the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles, where she's staying.
They released this video of her in the elevator of the Cecil Hotel.
All these crazy theories swirling around because of the video. It was a little scary.
Just strange behavior.
Either she's in some extreme distress, or as some people have speculated, she's hiding from someone, she's afraid. But it is noticeable.
Then, Elisa Lam's naked body was found floating in one of the hotel roof water tanks. The coroner ruled her death an accidental drowning, but not everyone agreed.
You know, there's always a possibility that someone took her up there.
Perhaps there were sex offenders in the area or in the hotel. Perhaps it was somebody who worked for the hotel.
I tried finding other people that were staying there when she was there.
If you look on the website of the Cecil Hotel, it makes it sound like it is a historic, interesting, rich in history place you want to go to in Los Angeles. I can tell you from being there, that is not the sense that I got.
When you walked inside the lobby of the Cecil, it was kind of the epitome of faded glamour. There are these beautiful columns. It definitely had a feeling of The Shining. There's these lovely murals that harken back to the time when the Cecil was a very nice upper middle class hotel in downtown Los Angeles, which when it was built in the 1920s was the center of LA. It was where all the nice hotels and restaurants and theaters were.
Thank you for calling the European-style Cecil Hotel, the best affordable hotel in downtown Los Angeles.
What the website didn't tell you was that one half of the building was still housing basically for extremely low income and transient tenants who had lived there for a long time.
Some of those permanent residents have sordid histories. Many of them are drug users. Many of them are on probation or parole.
The Hotel Cecil was basically on Skid Row in Los Angeles, where there was rampant mental illness and drug addiction and crime. It was a really rough area. I just don't think you can ignore the fact that if there was foul play, it would have been very easy for somebody from the other side of the building to have stalked Elisa, to have known about how to get to the roof, having lived there for years, and to have put her into the tank.
If we were looking at this as a potential murder situation, we would be looking for someone who was casing the hotel, looking for somebody who was a vulnerable target. Seeing someone who's young, out of her element, and friendly might be somebody who a perpetrator would hone right in on because they would be less likely to be noticed.
The Cecil's history is filled with really horrible stuff.
In the 50s and 60s, again, economic decline in downtown Los Angeles. This hotel became a place where people would go to end their lives.
there had been so many suicides at the Cecil that the people who lived there called it the suicide. Most of the people committed suicide by jumping out the windows, and a lot of times they would check in under assumed names.
Since its opening in 1924, the Cecil Hotel has seen as many as 13 deaths from unnatural causes.
And in 1964, there was a very tragic murder that is still unsolved that took place at the Cecil. And that was the murder of a woman named Goldie Osgood. She was raped and she was strangled, and her killer was never found.
Then there were serial killers who stayed there.
In the 1980s, the serial killer Richard Ramirez, the infamous Night Stalker, lived there. Another serial killer from Austria in the 90s, Jack Unterweger, stayed there.
For some reason, there was this dark cloud over this hotel's history.
But when Alyssa checked into the hotel, though it was known as the Hotel Cecil, its actual name was the Stay on Main. And that was another kind of rebranding effort. So one of the really weird things about Alyssa's disappearance and her subsequent death, to this day, we don't know where Alyssa's cell phone went.
Had it been discovered in her room, we know it wasn't in the tank. There are phone records in there that are going to be very revealing as to who she's called, who she's received calls from, and the investigators would have used that to track her movements.
When police were asked at the press conference concerning Alyssa's disappearance where the cell phone might be, they didn't really answer.
Her parents via cell phone? Do you have her cell phone? Was it left at the hotel?
I don't want to talk about the cell phone right now very much. We have some of her property, but she was in regular contact with her parents, and up until 5 6 days ago.
The only thing you can think of is that phone was more than likely stolen, and someone else took it. They either used it, sold it, whatever. The phone remains a mystery.
So was Elisa Lamb killed after encountering someone at the hotel? And what would have been the motive?
It is possible to get into a person's room, rape her, kill her, and get away with it.
Nobody notified. There's no water. I have to check out and find another hotel, have a business meeting.
But trouble at the Cecil Hotel isn't just a maintenance issue. It's a suspicious death investigation for the LAPD.
21-year-old Elisa Lamb decides that she wants to travel and come down to California. She checked into the Cecil Hotel. She was last seen acting erratically on elevator surveillance video and then disappeared.
She certainly seems afraid of something or someone. I've always thought that there was a real threat, something to be afraid of outside of the elevator.
She was found 19 days later after hotel guests complained of an unusual odor and color in the hotel's water.
That initiated a maintenance man to go up and check the water tanks. As he peered inside, he discovered the floating body of Elisa Lamb.
News that still isn't sitting well with some hotel guests who tell us they're disgusted.
Wouldn't you be if there was a dead body in the water you were using and drinking?
It's kind of odd, the whole damn thing.
The medical examiner ruled Elisa's death was an accidental drowning.
I feel that she likely climbed up there on her own.
But some disagreed with the ruling and thought there were still too many unanswered questions and strange circumstances surrounding Elisa's death.
The biggest question that appears to be unanswered is how did she get in the tank?
There's potentially two ways to get into that tank. There's the ladder that allows you to climb the side of the tank and then go into that open access portal.
The tanks had 20-pound metal lids, so they would have been pushed to the side before she got into the water tank.
Or there's another ladder that leads to the top of the elevator shaft, which is higher than the tank, and if you were up there on that platform, you could jump down onto the top of the tank, where she ultimately was discovered.
But either way, it was a really tricky kind of maze-like situation to actually get up and then into one of these 4 water tanks.
I visited the scene of where she was found on the rooftop of the hotel, and looked at the tanks, but where the location was difficult to get to. The terrain surrounding the tanks was fairly difficult to maneuver.
Now we're talking about a young lady who is not, by a lot of standards, big, maybe 120 pounds, that can climb that ladder, single-handedly push that lid off, which weighs only about 20 or so pounds, but still it takes some effort. You have to think maybe something else was involved, another person.
The fact that she would have had to have done all of these steps to get into this tank really makes you wonder, was there foul play?
And not all experts agreed with the coroner's ruling that this was an accidental drowning.
My name is John Heiseroth. I've performed during my career about just north of 6,000 complete autopsies. When I look at the autopsy report, it's hard to conclude from the objective findings that Elisa Lamb died as a result of drowning. There was no water in the lungs. In a drowning, there's oftentimes water in the stomach. There's no water in the stomach in this case.
The lungs showed post-mortem changes. This was not conclusive one way or the other for a drowning, as the tissues had undergone changes, decomposition changes.
There was too much decomposition. There was not a lot to save there. I'm Dr. William Maroney, and I'm the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for Bay County, Michigan. Ordinarily, if you look at a good, healthy set of lungs in an autopsy, they kind of look like the sponge in your bucket when you're washing your car. But after 19 days at greater than ambient temperatures, submerged in water, you're going to actually make them more look like slimy liver. So there is no clear, unambiguous source of water in the lungs.
She was found in a tank of water, but being found in a tank of water doesn't necessarily mean you drowned in that tank of water. You could have been killed outside and dumped in that tank of water.
We're backing into the decision that this is a death by drowning instead of aggressively presenting it. It's a default. That's what it is. It's a default.
What's even weirder about the body is the fact that there were no scratches or bruises.
There's nothing to indicate that she had any ligature marks or petechial hemorrhaging in her eyes, which would indicate she'd been choked.
So if one wants to hypothesize that she was killed outside and then dumped in the tank, it would be virtually impossible to conclude that she would have been suffocated, perhaps by a pillow. There's no way, even the best forensic pathologists, unless they're extremely suspicious, would detect that. Not only that, in this case, she was 3 weeks decomposed. So to find any evidence that she had a pillow over her face to suffocate her would be completely gone.
The speculation that Miss Lamb was murdered would be just that, speculation.
But there was something else in the autopsy report adding to the speculation.
There was an error that was made on a checkbox.
Based on the handwriting, some believe Elisa's death was marked as an accident on June 15th, and 3 days later, something caused the coroner to change her death to undetermined. But Dr. Tovar says the changes were made at the same time, and the date above the accident box actually says June 18th.
It would be probably wiser if the coroner would have ruled the case undetermined, because the findings for the cause of death, drowning, aren't there. The findings for the determination of accidental death aren't there.
And if authorities thought it was so easy for Elisa Lamb to get into the tank, why didn't the LAPD check the tank when she went missing?
In this case, when they originally searched the hotel roof, they missed that hatch. And unfortunately, we have to own that.
But one of the autopsy findings had Dr. Heiseroth really puzzled.
Miss Lamb, when they finally found the body, she was found floating on the water facing up. I find that a little bit problematic because when a person drowns, they drown under the water. The natural configuration of the body wants to go to fetal position, gaseous production rises the body. As it rises up, the feet and legs dangle downward as a rudder, and you rise all the way to the top of the surface face down. In this case, Elisa Lam was found face up, which to me is unusual.
We know she's dead. We just don't know what brought it about. Why did this occur? Quite frankly, LAPD and New York PD are the two of the best police departments in the United States.
The LAPD might have just been overloaded, and it might have been easy to kind of say it was accidental, and that's the story we're sticking to.
Therefore, you don't have to do anything else. And after all, I probably have 50 more cases, and I need to get to those. And this was an easy solve.
At the time that Elisa went missing, the Christopher Dorner incident was blowing up. We had a rogue ex-LAPD officer running around killing people. All of Southern California was on high alert. That drew some of the attention away from Elisa's case, unfortunately. There were up to 18 officers and detectives initially assigned to help find Elisa. A lot of those resources had to be retracted in order to go attend to that more urgent, I hate to say that, but more life-threatening situation. And so then it came down to 4 primary detectives.
Something else odd was discovered at the scene. Could Elisa's clothes that were found in the tank with her actually hold clues to what happened on the roof? Elisa Lam is found dead in a water tank on top of LA's Cecil Hotel. Her death was ruled an accidental drowning, but not everyone believed it was just an accident. If she was murdered, what would have been the motive?
It is possible to get into a person's room, rape her, kill her, and get away with it.
So there's speculation as to, well, where is the information on the rape kit? It's there, it's in the case file. And the results of examining that rape kit were that there was no evidence whatsoever of any type of sexual assault.
I don't think that means too much to me. This is a woman who's been soaking in a vat of water for 3 weeks. It doesn't surprise me that had she been raped, it would have been all washed out. It would have been all washed out.
On exam, we didn't identify any evidence of trauma to the anus or genital regions.
However, Dr. Tovar did discover blood pooling in her anal area.
I feel that the fluid that was collected there was a result of her decomposition.
It could have been sexual assault. I'm saying it's possible because Ms. Lam was fairly advanced in her decomposition. And I don't know how or why they didn't rule that out. They chose just to say, it's decomposition, and we're done.
Also fueling speculation of a possible sexual assault was the fact that Elisa Lam was found naked.
That's very unusual.
The reason that she was naked and why she was found that way is not necessarily determined by the autopsy itself. Her clothing was present in the tank with her, including a watch and her room key.
The clothes were the same clothes she's wearing in the bizarre hotel elevator surveillance video.
I personally believe that it's probably more likely than not that if she were to be thrown in that tank to get rid of the clothes, they were thrown in after her.
She may have been forced to remove her clothes and get into the tank. Probably the biggest question I have about the crime scene that hasn't been answered, what are the weird sandy particles that were found on her clothes that were floating next to her in the water tower?
So could it have been from some of the material from the roof or whatever?
Had she placed her clothes on the roof before she got into the water tank? Had somebody else made her strip and placed her clothes on the roof?
I examined the clothing and noticed that there was this sand-like particulate. What it actually was not determined by myself.
The two explanations that law enforcement ultimately accepted was that there was either sediment from the bottom of the tank that was pre-existing or sediment that had been transferred there in her clothes from going to the beach.
But it seems like if she were swimming freely in the tank, all the sediment would wash off the clothes, and then if she took the clothes off, they wouldn't have any sediment on them. Think about it, you're like washing the clothes while swimming through the tank. Usually in a forensic case, if it doesn't make sense, it's probably not correct.
But there was something else in Elisa's autopsy that would stir up even more controversy, and it might reveal the answer to the biggest question everyone wanted to know.
Elisa Lam is a college student in Vancouver, Canada. She goes to Los Angeles and checks into the Cecil Hotel. She was discovered in a water tank, found floating in the water that the hotel guests had consumed.
Her death was ruled an accidental drowning, but some believed she may have been murdered. And in her autopsy, something would raise even more questions.
Bipolar disorder was listed as a contributing factor in her death. It is my opinion that she likely, in her state of mind that she was in, somehow climbed to the top of the tower and got into the tank, at which point there's no way to get out of the tank, and she ultimately drowned.
Just because somebody has bipolar disorder doesn't mean they're suicidal.
I just think there's a lot of unexamined things that, yes, could point to just a very tragic mental breakdown, but could also point to foul play, perhaps from somebody who knew the Cecil very, very well.
It's possible that someone was able to get her up there because she was more adventure-seeking and she was in a state of mind where she wasn't evaluating risk in the same way that she might normally. And we do know that when people are looking to prey on someone, they're not looking for the really confident, grounded person who says, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing?
The fact that she would have had to have done all of these steps to get into this tank, it's all so elaborate and so unbelievable, especially if Elisa was having some kind of psychotic break or mental break.
So if she's having a psychotic break, how does she then have a completely normal conversation with this very astute manager of a bookstore? I don't know.
And you can even see that in the elevator. You know, she's trying to hide from something that's taking place in her mind, but it's her reality.
I feel like watching it, she's afraid of something external and that it's not just an internal fear or panic.
One of the questions I had was if she could get in, how come she couldn't get out? And what I've learned is that these tanks are very much like the tank on the back of your toilet. And as the water goes down, the further from the top you are. And so as that water's being used and it's going down, the less ability you have to climb out. And even if the water was at that top level, she would not have been able to grab hold of anything to pull herself out. So she was doomed the moment she got in there. It's a horrific way to die.
Months after Elisa Lam's death, her parents filed a lawsuit against the hotel management for negligence, but a judge dismissed the case. And as far as the Cecil Hotel, its future remains a mystery.
The developer who recently purchased the Cecil said he was going to turn it in to this cool, live workspace for young professionals, but it's been years and nothing's happened. If you go to the Cecil today, it's locked. Sometimes you see what looks like tenants going in and out of the building, but then if you look up, it looks abandoned.
There's no satisfying conclusion to this story, and I think because of that, it really has become a much bigger story than I anticipated.
The death of Elisa Lam is one of the great mysteries of our time. There is no story that I get asked about more than Elisa Lam, hands down.
There was something about this death, the way it was found, what happened to her, and the mystery around it, that people were incredibly fascinated by it.
There should somehow be footage that corresponds with the famous elevator footage. There should be some proof. There should be something that tells us what happened to her.
This case could be reopened if there was enough public pressure.
In forensic medicine, there's a case is never truly closed all the way. You know, it can always be revisited if new information, new facts come into play to investigate.
Although the case has been closed, no one to this day still knows exactly how Elisa Lam got up on the hotel roof and inside the water tank. And the whereabouts of her phone still remains unclear. If you have any tips that could lead investigators to reopen the case, please contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS.